All right, I will call our meeting to order. This is the September 20th meeting of Electoral Area Services Committee. Welcome, everyone. As we have members of the public, I just want to note that emergency exits are to my left. There's two exits there through the door that you came in, and there's also an exit behind us. And the muster point is out in the parking lot. I just want to respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the unceded and traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. I respectfully acknowledge the work of the Comox people and their ancestors that has really created a beautiful land of plenty here in the Comox Valley, and really wish to continue our government-to-government relationships with Comox First Nation. We have a couple of delegations on the agenda. First up, we have Suzanne Sawyer, Kim Stubblefield, and Catherine Davidson from the Macaulay Road and Area Neighborhood Association as a delegation for receipt.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded, and I will turn it over to the folks from Macaulay Road.
Good morning. My name is Suzanne Sawyer, the chair of the Macaulay Road Area Neighborhood Association, which we have formed as a nonprofit society to support and represent the concerns of the service area of Macaulay Road in Black Creek, Area C of the CVRD. Catherine Davidson, treasurer, and Kim Stubblefield, secretary of our association, are here with me. It is great to be here today and see the faces, sort of all the people we have been corresponding with over the last few years and meet other committed, caring folks of the CVRD. Thank you for allowing us to address you personally and present our ask to you. Also, we thank all the individuals and agencies that responded with thoughtfulness and expediency to the many local residents' queries and correspondences. We have read and discussed them carefully, and they brought to my mind a quote of Aristotle: "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." This is the thinking we need as our presentation is brought to you, because we need the support of all of you. I have a long-standing interest in the welfare of the people and the environment of Macaulay Road, since my husband and I bought and built on an 8-acre property 44 years ago. At that time, there was no pavement, no water, and no electricity at our place near the end of the road. But we did have something very special. We had an alternate exit that was not gated, and it was a well-maintained logging road connecting to the paved Duncan Main and the Comox logging road. We never felt trapped in Macaulay Road if Macaulay Road should flood, break up in an earthquake, or be threatened by wildfire. Now, after 44 years, that sense of safety and security has been shockingly eroded by gated roads and an explosive population. There are now approximately 1,500 to 1,700 people living in the service area of Macaulay Road, and a huge increase in children, businesses, and discrete RVers and livestock. There have been many meetings, correspondences, and discussions, but all have been sorely inadequate in solving the simple, but not so easy, critical issue of creating an open, obvious, and safe exit from Macaulay Road if there is a road blockage anywhere above Naylor Road. The exit must be able to accommodate hundreds of cars and livestock trailers and 1,000 or more men, women, and children, all in a timely manner. Reading the current local emergency plan carefully and knowing my area extremely well, nothing planned has come close to meeting this basic need of safety and security for the many people and animals in my neighborhood and area. On a personal note, I was a teacher for many years in the US and Canada. And one thing that was very common in all schools and grades in which I taught was the fire, earthquake, and intruder danger drills. From 100 to 2,000 students learned how to exit a school and muster using posted and practiced evacuation routes, both primary and alternate. Macaulay Road residents need to know their primary and alternate routes, which must be clearly marked and have ease of access at a moment's notice. No one wants to live in a boxed canyon with a fire rushing in. It must be stated that much of the land in our area is zoned to allow for 2 dwellings. Currently, with the demands and cost of housing, many of the property owners are availing themselves of this extra dwelling option, significantly adding to the number of residents. With the ongoing property development, increase in population, we have many commuters to Courtney and Campbell River now, and the land designated agricultural continues. The options for emergency plans and acquiring public road right-of-ways are becoming limited. With this in mind, the time to act is now. Therefore, the following is what we ask of you today. We request that the Electoral Services Committee directs Comox Valley Regional District staff to undertake a feasibility study to identify several access routes for Macaulay Road and area residents. These access routes should enable a workable emergency evacuation area of 1,700 residents and livestock, and identify options for secondary permanent access roads to support the rural road network and connectivity goals aligning with the CVRD's rural OCP, transportation network and active transportation plan. Also, we request that the local emergency evacuation plan for Macaulay Road and area be updated and made available and circulated to all residents. Thank you. I'd like to turn this over to Catherine. She has some things to talk about.
And I'll just point out, you've got maybe about 3 or 4 minutes. Thank you. Right. Thank you, Suzanne. We do have a short PowerPoint presentation, so we will try and flip through that, but I see you have the map up. And to orientate everyone on the map, this is the north end of Area C. It's bordered by the Oyster River on the top dark line, the inland highway, the gray line on the left, and it comes down Ham Road, goes from the inland highway to the old 19A. So Macaulay Road starts at the corner, winds around. You can see we've identified on the map, this is the regional district map that was used for population density for the household waste collection study. The green points are showing the denser population areas. And as you can see on the map where we've identified the point where there is no alternative access, a lot of the population is in the north end around Martin Park, the Robinson Lake area, and then up to James Crescent. And then it circles back towards Macaulay Heights, where the road dead ends. It's 17 kilometers, about 17 kilometers to the end of the road. And I think we clocked 28 kilometers of feeder roads off this road. So our present, let's see, I'll go. Trying to move that forward. Oops. So our problems with the present emergency program or protocols is that if the road's blocked, we can't get in or out, and how would the emergency personnel get in? We're very concerned about fires. In Lytton, BC, they had about 15 minutes to evacuate, and that's a quarter of the population of this area. We have, the protocols take time. It's, the time to evacuate is critical.
if a wildfire comes through. In 2013, Mike Fournier, who's the Comox Valley Emergency Program Coordinator, he responded at the time that the plan that they had developed was the best they could do with the present road access and topography of the area. Putting a permanent road through would be up to the politicians. So we have a couple of pictures. This is a closure during a windstorm. The traffic was lined up. The RCMP attended. There was no entrance or exit for several days. Here, the telephone or the hydro poles came down, 3 snapped over the road, and we have people trying to walk home. At the point that the hydro pole snapped, it was in the 6K mark, and it was be at least 10K to the end of the road for them to walk home. So we are looking at other alternate access, and we've been told about the subdivision process, the subdivision application, and this is a partnership. It requires approval from the regional district, approval from the Agricultural Land Commission, and support from Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. In 2014, there was a farmland subdivision application, and the CVRD staff did refer to an emergency route along the easement that was suggested. It didn't happen. We don't know why it wasn't registered. We don't have the documentation regarding that, but it does indicate that the regional district is clearly responsible to initiate this planning process, because it does align with all the goals and priorities in the various plans that you have in place. We're talking about rural connectivity. It would also support reduced vehicle emissions, because we have all these people traveling in and then they have to turn around and travel out. And that's 4 school buses a day. That's 8 trips. You know, we have these people commuting to Courtenay, Campbell River. It's a lot of traffic. There was a traffic count done about, less than 10 years ago, and there was over 1,000 cars a day. So with the population, we're thinking it must be at least 1,500 cars a day traveling on that road, plus all the service vehicles. We're concerned about climate change planning, more severe storms, droughts, extreme temperatures, and so on. So we're looking at what can be done now. We want a workable emergency access route and educate residents of these routes. We need to plan for future road access through a feasibility study. We need a commitment to monitoring property sales in the area that would lend itself for the availability of building suitable roads. We're going to be creative and explore land swaps or exchanges for possibilities of road access, and develop partnerships with other levels of government to support this. So we need our elected officials to prioritize and action these very much needed road accesses in the Macaulay Road area. On the left here of these pictures, this is the evacuation route that's identified in the plan through the Cranberry Farm Gate. It would require the RCMP intervention to unlock the gate and monitor and lead people through the gate, eventually ending up on the Inland Island Highway. On the right is a picture of the evacuation route that's suggested, where people would walk through this field, the farmer's field, from the end of Macaulay Heights to Bruce Road. On the left here is the Lorry Road emergency exit that's available to residents from Lorry Road. It does require some maintenance, and I believe it's on the parks crew's to-do list. And on the right is the emergency evacuation sign that's posted on Sturgis Road. And that's the sort of thing we would like to see in our area. It's such a big area. We need to be able to direct people to the appropriate exit routes. So just a picture here, we were at the Black Creek Fair a week ago, and we had a good turnout, and we signed up quite a few new members. It was a good day, and we did write down some of their issues. So that's like a work plan in the future for us. And yeah, I guess we should summarize, but really if we need a workable emergency access route now, and we need to plan for better permanent road accesses. And thank you. And Kim is going to just finish up here.
I'm afraid you've gone quite a bit over time.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm going to ask if there's any questions from the directors, and hopefully some of your points will come up through the questions. So we have Director Grieve.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome to the delegation. I had the great privilege of attending a little social croquet match up at Suzanne's place and with the burgeoning society. I would say that, you know, we've got probably right now, this is definitely foremost on people's minds. We look no further than the interior and the wildfires and what's gone on there over the summer. So I think there's definitely a good chance of bringing this forward for some discussion. And I will bring up a motion under new business if notice a motion on that. But basically, I think that you were asking a little bit about the probably the one spot trail or the emergency access egress route that we were working with parks. And I would say that the regional district is all split up into silos, as you know, that we only tax for certain services and only the participants vote. But you know, we have what we call our electoral area park service, which is paid into by all 3 electoral areas. And it's a very limited budget, but I think we're working with that service. And I would ask staff actually if Mark wants to comment at all on securing some route through the right of way of the old one spot and maybe some of the private land that was sold through to some of the private property owners in the Ham Road, Macaulay Heights interface area there. So I'm just wondering, does the staff want to comment on the progress on that? Because I think you said you didn't know where we were at on that issue. And I think it is stalled, but I'd like some clarification from staff.
Thank you very much, Director Grieve, and Mark Harrison can comment with respect to parks planning, and that includes trails. And I know Howie and Bruce are here as well and have done a lot of work with respect to evaluating alternatives for emergency purposes in this neighborhood too. But I'll first pass it on to Mark.
Thanks, Russell. Through Madam Chair, to answer Director Grieve's question, Parks Department has been working with a private owner to try to secure access through what was once the one spot trail road dedication, but that is private property, and negotiations are kind of ongoing at this moment.
I see,
So,
Director. Oh, sorry, Mark.
No, so just no further to add to that.
And Madam Chair, I'll just add to that too, that our parks and trails initiatives might provide, if realized, might provide the opportunity to be duplicated or used for emergency purposes, but would not necessarily be that alternate road that accommodates school buses and day-to-day traffic or otherwise, which falls within the Ministry of Transportation.
Thanks, Russell. Director Arbor, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to the delegation for all their work on this and thinking about how to solve this problem of having a single road. And I think something I heard is that there seems to be an evacuation plan, but perhaps it could be updated. So I'd love to hear from Howie some thoughts on that. And because there's questions around, you know, whether we need to, for example, when the gate for, I have lots of questions basically, and I would love to see a plan that definitely, as the delegation says, that's available to residents, and if it needs to be updated, to update it. Because just looking on Google Earth with the Duncan Bay Road, the logging road, it seems like a good option if you had a guarantee that in times of emergency, somebody has a key and can open the gate and traffic can use it. But then I noticed that there's no connection onto the inland highway, that it's a bridge over. So that's a, you know, where do you drive people to once you're on it? So lots of questions, and I think Director Grieve has brought up this topic before at EASC. So I'd love to hear from Howie what's the status of emergency planning, and whether we just did our evacuation plans for Hornby and Denman, and that was very useful last year. to kind of update our information. And I'm just wondering if that's in the works, if that's something that's being looked at.
Okay, through Madam Chair to Director Arbor. Yeah, so we do have an evacuation plan that was done for that area, the community back in 2013. It can be re-looked at. At that time, we did find some alternate methods to get people out of that community, and that's kind of our main planning of emergencies. We don't have a service that maintains roads or provides that ongoing maintenance process. We plan to the best of our knowledge and abilities to provide the community options that we can get them out in a safe manner. So in that plan, it has identified that. Not as much has changed for us in that area. That plan was brought to a town hall just after it was adopted, and review with the community at that time. We took some of the feedback from that community open house and did adjust the plan a little bit. It was more about just looking at the flood potentials more than just the wildfire initiative. So we did that. Right now, working with the Chief Green in the area, we do kind of assess those based on wildfire and the increased risk. And at this time, we are kind of limited in what we can do. We do have some options to evacuate. Again, we just can't take roads and right of ways, so we don't have the service to provide that.
Director Arbor, did you have any other follow-up questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'll follow Dr. Greaves' lead on this in terms of next steps. But I do wonder, it's true, it's a big horseshoe road, right? And on the one hand, there seems to be the opportunity in the long term to connect sort of the Ham Road and Macaulay right at the end. So that would be nice if that's in our existing trails and parks plan, that's great. But in the short term, with increased fire risk, perhaps if something happened closer to Saratoga Speedway, I mean, I have the experience that of knowing what it's like to get 1,200 people out, because I was manager of the Hornby Festival for a few years, and that's about the amount of people. And I can tell you it takes, you know, in one line, that's a good 30 minutes, 45 minutes to get if everyone's living at once. So I understand the concerns of residents. But yeah, I'll leave it with the Director Grieva. It's good to know at least that you have a head start in terms of there being an existing evacuation plan. That's something we didn't have in this area before, but hopefully this association, Macaulay Association, can stay in close contact with emergency services to see how we can improve some of those road accesses. Sorry, that was not a question. I was just thinking out loud, I guess.
That's fine. Director Grieve has a question.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, there's a few pinch points throughout the Comox Valley where there's no back door. And this is definitely one. And the other one I would say is probably Plateau Road, as well as the Railway Avenue bunch. But I think now we have access to the, again, the old right-of-way of the railway going through from Spike through to Endall. And I think that the committee's quite right, or the society is quite right in saying that we have to move in partnership with all orders of government, especially you know, the ALR when it comes to you know, trailways through agricultural land. They're very reticent to approve that in a lot of instances, but in this case, there's a, you know, it's just one option. So as I say, I'll be bringing a motion forward under new business to explore what options are available. And I think that it's high time. I've been on this probably since 2013, probably the first plan after that big windstorm that I remember very well. So yes, once again, I think you know, that I applaud the group for organizing and becoming a society. You'll see later on in the rural community grants, they've already asked for a grant to get themselves started. And I think that was, you know, I think I encouraged that as well, just to get them off the ground. So again, you know, you brought a lot of this forward. It's not new to us. We've been tossing this around for many years now, but obviously we can't, it's not an esoteric question anymore. It's a matter of life and death, and it could be a real serious issue should we have a wildfire in this area or an earthquake or anything like that. So, you know, it's, again, what do you say, about 1,100 residents on the road total?
1,700.
1,300.
1,700.
1,700. That's without the Canada Stats 2021 coming in. So
That's right.
yeah. So anyway, just once again, thank you very, very much for taking this initiative.
Thanks, Director Grieve. I have a couple of questions as well. So from the sounds of, you know, what I'm hearing from staff, maybe if I can just clarify, through the CVRD services, we have the ability to highlight parcels that could potentially become trails, but not necessarily roads. Is that what I'm hearing?
Madam Chair, I'll just refer to Alana Mullally, General Manager of Planning and Development, to speak to our community plan and what role it might have with respect to future roads, because there's a component there.
Thank you, Russell. Through Madam Chair to the directors. Thank you very much to this group who's worked tirelessly on this issue for many years. When we updated, working with the Electoral Area Services Committee of the time, we updated the rural OCP bylaw, which the delegation has spoken to today. We included policy language in there about the pinch points that you raised, and certainly Macaulay Road is one of those. So as Russell suggested, and I think the room well knows, we've got a couple of opportunities, and the key one being for land acquisition is working with the ministry for that road dedication. And that really is, as the delegation has flagged, we need partnership and collaboration there. So we do, you know, when these opportunities arise with private property owners, we do try to afford ourselves of them. But as the delegation well knows, we've not yet had success on that. As Mark has pointed out, the community park service as currently configured is not about roads, as you've said, Director Hamir, and it's certainly not about maintenance of those existing accesses. But I would suggest that, you know, the delegation has requested that staff look at this. And so if the board is wanting us to see where the stars might align, then that's something that we could, you know, put our minds to with this vein. But we are limited, you know, the jurisdiction, as you well know, really does reside with the Ministry of Transportation in the province to acquire land and then certainly maintain them as roads or road accesses. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. I do recall the issue around the ALR property and the old access did come to electoral areas a few months ago. Would staff be able to just remind us what happened there with that property? Do you recall?
Shelter Bay. It was the Shelter Bay subdivision. Shelter Point, Shelter Bay.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm putting folks on the spot. I thought it was a couple of months ago, but you know, with summertime, it's time does fly. Yes.
Madam Chair, I don't recall off the top of my head if Shelter Bay is Oyster River side, so that's within Strathcona, but maybe I'm thinking of something different.
It was on Macaulay Road. Evans owned it.
Yep.
Evans property.
Yeah.
And it was subdivided. It was ALR. It was subdivided into 3 lots.
Yes, we had that one. That was about 2017. So
Yes.
yeah, I'm not sure of something a couple of months ago, but in that case, we did negotiate with the owner and endeavor through the subdivision process. And we did get to the point of the owner identifying potential for an access easement, as the delegation pointed out, but we weren't able to come to agreement on finalizing that access point. So the registration did not occur as the delegation flagged.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. You know, I do want to just thank the delegation for all the hard work and the research that went into this presentation. I think it's important not just for the electoral areas, but for the general public to also see what's happening in your community. And I just want to note that comment that you did put in your presentation about a permanent road being up to the politicians. But I think, as you can hear, a permanent road is not necessarily up to these politicians at this table, but we would be happy to work with residents to delegate to and sort of advocate to the provincial level, which is really where the power is, from what I hear from staff, for a permanent road, if that's what's going on, or sorry, if that's what the community wants. I don't see any other questions from the electoral area directors. Hearing and seeing none on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Oh, sorry, I do see a comment, and I will.
Yes, thank you. What I wanted to point out also is that with our correspondence back to Ministry of Transportation and Highways and the different ministries, and this has been over 10 years, is that the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure suggests that they would support the CVRD planning. So they're looking at the CVRD to initiate the planning, first of all, for any road accesses. When they have a subdivision application, it goes through, from what I understand, and this is what we've received back, is it goes through the CVRD first, and this is also evidenced in the 2014 subdivision, the CVRD first, the Agricultural Land Commission, and then Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to comment on that. We do have a copy of the letter from the minister too. And my advice is for you, from your perspective, if you want a road, a dedicated road that is built and maintained to allow for traffic, ultimately it will be the Ministry of Transportation and Highways that has to be committed to acquiring the land, building the road, and maintaining the road. I would not give up on encouraging the ministry to come to the table with those resources. Absolutely, the regional district can help in the planning as to where it would best be located and what the best options were. But unless we have the commitment from the province to undertake securing the land, building a road, and maintaining it, it will just be a study on the shelf. But we're more than willing to help, and I think the board, if they direct us anyways, will be there for that. The ministry has demonstrated that they do undertake their own works and their own priorities without us undertaking planning work. And the new bridge across the Solom River is an example of that, right? Where they purchased the land, sought the approvals, built the road, and now maintain and operate that road. So I really would encourage you to bring the ministry to the table with those resources, and staff will come back with the options as to what may be available for this regional district to help with the planning end of things. And this committee can consider whether they're willing to provide those resources on the planning end.
I think it's interesting because it's the chicken before the egg. So planning for where, and so if the planning has happened and these sites are, identified, then we would know what the budget requirements would be. So we're going back and forth on this and have been for quite a few years, and I'm hoping that we'll get some further action on this today, and maybe set the feasibility study to identify what's possible in the future.
Thank you very much. Director Arbour, sorry.
Yeah, because of the words of the CEO, I just want to check with the delegation. Like, to me, it seems like building a whole new road is quite the endeavor. And not having seen the evacuation plan, am I off track if I say that Duncan Bay Road seems to be really good if it could actually land into the Island Highway? Because you might avoid having to build a road if you can actually secure the access to an alternate route. Or is building a road really the optimal solution? Like, I'm asking that because I have a suspicion this will come back and we'll have to vote on it. So while you folks are here, I thought I'd hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks, Director. I'll direct that to staff.
Now we can provide some insight.
Madam Chair, Director, yeah, we actually, with the Chief Green and the fire department, we do have access to all the gates, the keyed access roads to that route, and that is one of the routes that we've been planning as required as an evacuation route when needed. So it has been identified. Part of evacuation planning is we try to, we don't have the rights to the roads and maintaining them. So one of the things we'll have to look at is the first priorities in assessing the situation is what do we need to do to that road to make it passable? And depending on the urgency that comes from the fire, if it's tactical evacuation, it might be just foot traffic for the first little while, and then be able to bring machinery in to open that road up further for vehicles.
Thank you. Any further? Okay, on receipt, I'll call the question then. Is anyone opposed? And that is carried. So, thank you to the delegation. I believe we have another delegation that is on the call. The Hornby Water Stewardship, Ellen Leslie and Darren Bond.
Move receipt, including the Northern Lights.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. And over to Ellen and Darren. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's showing that I've prevented screen sharing, so I don't know if you can put up the presentation.
I believe you've just been made host, so you can share screen.
Let me just turn that. Okay. Great. Over to you, Ellen.
Go ahead.
Ellen, are you on mute?
Has Ellen been made a panelist? Yeah. I think she's been made a panelist, so I'm not sure. And we can see your presentation that's on the screen.
Yeah. Well, we were chatting a few minutes ago, so maybe if she comes off of mute, she can pick it up, but maybe I'll just get started. Oh, there she is.
Oh, there we go. Ellen, your video's on, but I think your mute is still on. There you go. Are you frozen?
No.
Maybe Ellen, is your connection okay? Do you want to try? We know that connection to Hornby can be sometimes fraught.
I am having a dreadful time here.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Can you see the presentation, Ellen?
Good morning.
Okay, go ahead.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Maybe Darren, if you were able to start.
Sure. Why don't I get started? And if you can figure out the issue, Ellen, just jump in.
Sure.
So thank you very much for having us. We'll do our short presentation. Want to talk about what our purpose is today, a bit of context and background, and what our proposal is. So really today's purpose is just to explore interest with you to see whether we could jointly develop some kind of an incentive or rebate program for water issues on Hornby. So it could be water quantity issues, or it could be water quality issues. So a bit of background, Hornby Water Stewardship, this is its 25th year in existence. And it's worked on various things such as, raising awareness and education of water issues on the island, producing and participating in groundwater studies, submitting to policy and plan development, such as the Water Sustainability Act at the provincial level, and jointly working with our economic development group to produce a Hornby water plan a few years ago. And that's what we continue to use to drive our activities. So we did a an in-depth water plan about 5 years ago that included members from the provincial government and yourselves and Islands Trusts and the community. And we came up with 6 different areas of things that we continue to work on, from individual action that people can take to community infrastructure and so on. So today, I just want to zero in on 2 of the things that we're looking at, collection tanks and septic conversion. And really, from a water quantity perspective, is there enough water for people's usage? Up until a few days ago with the heavy rain, as we all know, we were at the highest level of drought. So ecosystems impact would be happening and will be happening. And certainly seeing the Western red cedars suffering and more along those lines with the flora and fauna. We do monitor regularly the observation well. The provincial government has an observation well network for tracking groundwater levels. And you can see that bottom diagram from a few days ago. The blue shading shows the 10-year high and the 10-year low of the water level down that observation well. And the green line through the middle is the median level. And you see the blue line is the readings from our most recent year. It was out of commission for a few months this year, so that's why you see that blue line that's kind of going straight for a while, but it's back up and running as of about a month or so ago. And so we're at or below the 20-year low for that observation well. And using that as a proxy for the island, you can see that, and we've been hearing of late, wells going dry that have never gone dry over the last 40 years. On the quality side, a few years ago, we did some research showing the incidence of E. coli in samples. And that showed, as it had in the past, that almost a third, 32% of, albeit a small sample of residents, was showing presence of E. coli. And that's really, I put out a concerning incidence. Perhaps alarming incidents would be a better way of referring to that. So we've been gathering community input, over the last number of years, but also we participated in this with Hornby Arts, the summer show this year, last month, and asked people, would you be interested in some kind of incentive or rebate for a water quantity or a water quality solution for your home or property, or thinking more generally about others who might be at a low income level on the island. And we also then presented at the residents and ratepayers last week. So the upper little chart just shows the input that we got from the table that we were at during the summer show, and a little online polling at the residents and ratepayers meeting the other night. And very across the board support, I guess, as you would probably expect, to help people, especially the low income folks, who may not be able to capture water in the rainy season to be available for the increasingly dry summer seasons that we're in fact seeing. So in terms of, again, working together, been looking, there's these water protection, watershed protection groups and all sorts of areas. And water seems to show up in a little bit of the mandate of every different level of government and local groups. So this little picture is just meant to show that if you're doing watershed management, you would likely have groups involved, such as ourselves, a scrawny little stewardship group, and you might have a regional government, and you've got the provincial water quality branch and Islands Trust, and there is a piece of water that everybody's got a piece of. So again, we didn't want to come as a group saying we want more money or new money, cognizant of the position that government levels such as yourselves are in. So I wanted to see if it's possible that what we're proposing ties to something that you already are doing or want to be doing So this isn't sort of incremental work to your work plan and to your budgets, but something that would help you, spend the money that you're budgeting anyway in a more efficient way. So I spent time going through your strategic plan from September of last year and just circled a couple of items that seem to indicate that this was a priority from your perspective as well. Seeing the impacts of climate change in rural areas such as dry wells, and yes, we're seeing that, and watershed protection. So really the essence here is, if there really would be of any opportunity or interest, what we'd be looking at possibly, I'm thinking maybe like $10,000 for a pilot project. So just showing my math a little bit, I just went to the 2016 census, and Hornby has just over 1,000 people, which relates to about 560 homes. A fairly high percentage of people at the low income level. One person, median is 21,000, two or more, 53,000. So if they're living in the same home, they're in that kind of an income bracket. So the percentage of the population, say between 18 and 64, the folks that probably would be looking to improve their water collection or their septic system. So I thought, okay, well, if I took, say, a maybe 10% take up of those 19% of this 560 households, and I went and just checked out what the Nanaimo Regional District was doing. So they had about $400 towards a cistern, plus $350 towards the installation of it. So I thought, okay, if we were using $750 per instance of take up, then that would come out to about $7,980. So I thought, okay, that feels like that might be something that's absorbable within an existing portfolio. So what could be in that? It could be helping people purchase some kind of cistern or storage tanks, or a UV filter, so they're killing the E. coli just as the time it's coming into the house. Helping them with conversion to composting toilets, and I know you've got a whole feasibility study underway there. Or some kind of a water consumption measurement gauge, just to help people know how much they're actually using. So on top of that, we know that if it's cisterns, those can be quite expensive. So we do have an on-island group of residents that puts up money to provide low interest loans. So that might be something they would be interested in, providing some funding for people who couldn't afford the full cistern in the first place. And I've also chatted with the fire chief to see whether having additional cisterns around the island is a good thing or would be helpful from an emergency preparedness perspective. Thinking that he would say no, it's just too much trouble to try to hook up fire trucks to those. And he said, no, actually that could and would be potentially quite beneficial. So that's kind of a side benefit. So anyway, I think that's basically the presentation, the idea, and whether it's worth discussion or taking forward to develop some sort of a pilot project that might help meet your climate goals.
Thank you very much. I'll maybe ask if there's any questions. Director Arbor.
Thanks to Darren and Ellen for coming over, even though we can't hear Ellen. So I'm sure all the brilliant things that Darren said were meant to be Ellen's.
No.
Really good presentation on a very key topic, and I liked how succinct your presentation was, considering the different aspects to water. And good on you for digging up our rural area strategic planning notes from last year. Unfortunately, those will be out of date in about 6 days from now, because we'll be redoing it. So perhaps you're just sneaking under the radar. I assume a lot of the team will be recurring. Yeah, it's a great point, and we are fully aware that other districts, such as the regional district of Nanaimo, is quite a bit ahead of us in terms of looking at this kind of water service, including rebates and incentives. But we have similar issues across the regional district as well. And we know with climate, it's going to intensify. So there's a ton of people on wells, obviously, across this district. I don't know if we have figures on that, but when I take out our water systems, I figure it's at least 10,000 people that are probably on wells. Hornby is definitely one of the at-risk aquifers. They're being very low recharge compared to a lot of areas. So I think I don't think those studies have been done, but it'd probably be the worst aquifer for replenishment, just based on general knowledge of our region. In terms of the proposal, I'll pass it over to staff, but it seems I have two thoughts. One is that for rebates, I like longer term horizons. We don't have to commit, but it takes time to build a program and get the public knowing about it, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes if you start to launch something in year one, you have to do all your communication, all that stuff, and then people miss the window or whatnot. So sometimes a bit longer period of time. And we do not have a general watershed or water service either for Hornby or for the regional district. We sort of have one through the Comox Valley water service for that specific Comox Lake efforts, but nothing around wells. But I'm thinking at this amount, and I believe your math. I mean, I would want Dr. Marzo and others, maybe our engineering, to go over it and look at some of the assumptions in there. But I find that, you're basically replicating something that exists in the NIMO, looking at some of the figures used. The incentive seems attractive. The regional district does provide rebates and incentives. So my thoughts for today is worth exploring, and perhaps because we don't have a service and we probably don't want to establish a service just for a pilot project like this. But my question to CAO and Doug DeMarzo is, maybe we could look at, or would it be worthwhile to look at some things within the rural community grants and create a little bit of space for testing something like that around this approach, which seems to have many benefits in regards to the water situation on the island. So maybe I'd love to get some thoughts from staff and of course from my colleagues, Dr. Amir and Grieve.
Madam Chair, I think it would probably be best if the directors were to refer this presentation to staff to come back with a modest report that might look at the alternatives and what could or couldn't be done or considered, rather than us say comment on this today. If we were given that direction, we would take a look at what is required if this is a service that the regional district does, or what are the options if we are supporting other local groups, and certainly a sample of what's being done or what the opportunities are to think about this regionally, and or what is being done in other local governments. So I think all that information would be possible for us to get back to you at a subsequent EA committee if you were to direct us, and it might give you more than we can sort of comment just verbally today in response to this presentation.
Does that sound good? Go ahead, Director.
Yeah, maybe timeline is important, because if we were going to attempt something for 2022 budget, I'm just wondering if you're talking about a staff report that would come back really late into the budget process, or whether that's something that in the next month or two we would be able to, you'd be able to work with Hornby Stewardship and perhaps HIRA to look at the opportunities.
Certainly, we would be able to give you some options that you could consider in your work plan and budget for the year 2022.
Okay, in that case, I'll gladly refer it after, maybe under new business. I'll do just like Dr. Grieve with the Macaulay Road under new business. Maybe I'll propose a motion to refer to staff to work with Hornby Stewardship. But I'd still love to hear if my colleagues have other questions for the delegation or whatnot.
Thanks, Director Arbour. And Director Grieve does have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess probably the delegation or the definitive authority on a lot of this stuff, because they've done so much work on it. But when you talk about, cisterns and composting toilets and whatever. These things exist all over the world. Does anybody know why our particular provincial government is just dragging their feet on these issues?
I don't know, Darren or Ellen, if you want to comment on that, but
I can't answer that specifically, but I can say that we did just submit last week to the provincial government's budget 2022 process input with something similar to suggest that if they're looking at, again, regional, rural, groundwater citizens, that this would be a good idea from their perspective as well.
go ahead, follow up, Director Robert, or Director Green.
Well, just a comment more so that, you know, it's obvious that we're not the only jurisdiction that are having this discussion in the province right now after the summer we just had. I know I was out pulling the top off my well and sticking a 16-foot 1x2 or 2x2 down to see where the water level was for about 2 weeks there, just until I finally assured my wife that it really does replenish. It's coming back. Every day it goes down, but it pretty well comes back. So, but you know, that wasn't the case with a lot of people in my area that had wells run dry that, as you say, they've never had them go dry. So this is a real issue we're going to have to address going forward with climate change progressing as rapidly as it is.
Thanks, Director Grieve. I too, first of all, want to thank you for your presentation. Really great data, and it sounds like you've done quite a lot of consultation with the community with the ideas of trying to tap into the on-island low interest loans. I did speak to a few friends who live on Hornby, and their wells did run dry, and they had to do things like come over here to Courtney to take showers. So the question was, if this does happen again, and you know, this was not something that they could answer, is there a water service that can come and replenish wells, which often happens here where water tanks come over, but does that service even exist on Hornby?
Yes, there is one main water delivery service, and they've got a few properties where they extract water from deep wells, which causes concern to some neighbors. Their wells have gone dry, and there is, you know, arguments as to whether the water surface is causing that or not, or it's just a general water table going down because of climate change.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a very sustainable system if you're taking from the aquifer on one side and trying to replenish on the other side. Before I do see Director Arbor's hand up, but before I go to him, you know, the idea of switching to composting toilets does sound like one that would help with the E. coli issue, but maybe not necessarily water conservation. Is there any kind of interest in converting flushing toilets to composting? I mean, that would kind of solve a couple of the issues at the same time, but has that been discussed at all?
It's come up rarely. A couple of people have suggested that. So, you know, another way of approaching all of this might be to say, here's a certain amount of money that you could use for this, or this solution set, one of which could be converting from water to composting toilets. I wouldn't imagine much take up, but there certainly could be some.
Okay, thank you. Director Arbor.
We've just completed a feasibility for composting toilets on Hornby Island for the collection of residue, which the city already invested, I think, $8,000 starting a couple of years ago, and we have the result of that, including options for growing that over time. And when we think about the province as a partner, they have actually built the composting toilet into the building code now, which is helpful for homeowners. So those opportunities do exist. And I'm sure Water Stewardship's in touch with Islands Trust as well, because well, actually, the Islands Trust doesn't have building permits, still has the building code, but you know, you could look in the long term for places like Hornby to actually require rainwater collection system in the building of future homes. But I don't think Islands Trust will be able to even consider that with without having building permit processes. So yeah, there's a lot of, and then the second one that I'd say the CVRD is also invested in is, of course, the ESC has been sitting for now 1.5 years on a septic regulations report for covering all the rural areas, and I don't think we've decided really what to do with it yet, nor has staff, but we definitely have a comprehensive report that includes 2 areas on Hornby that are deemed high risk around E. coli and things like that. So those should be at the strategic session next week. I'll definitely recommend that we try to make a decision on whether to pursue some of those recommended options before the end of our term, which is only 1 year away from now. But we'll see how much political interest there is in that. So yeah, a lot of connected issues, but I think this particular one, I'm very supportive. I think it's targeted. And to Director Amir, there may be a link too, or for a note for CAO is, we were on a call with the Minister of Agriculture last week with Director Amir and Chair Kettler, also talking about dug up ponds and incentives for the province for farmers to actually, instead of relying on the surface or groundwater, to actually dig up ponds. And Dr. Amir has actually done that on our own property, so it's quite familiar, but there might be some thinking there as well around incentives around water, as Darren said. Maybe there's other ideas that could be brewed around if we wanted. I know staff will come back to say incentive is one way, here's these other ways. If you pursue incentive, here's the general basket of things that could be considered. So really good presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Arbor. And just one clarifying question for either Darren or Ellen. The photo of the cistern there, would the cisterns be filled with groundwater, or is that for roof water collection? What generally, when people have cisterns, what are they using it for?
Both. Some people do rainwater collection, and some people, this particular cistern is my own, and we have a deep well, and we trickle feed the cistern so that we don't put any pressure on the pump down the well.
Okay, yeah, because obviously if you are using that for drinking water, or, water that needs to have some level of cleanliness, then that's one thing. Roof water, best for gardening and for, other uses. But yeah, I look forward to hearing Director Arbor's motion at the end. And I want to thank both of you for your presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. We are going to move on to the next item, which is the management report for receipt. Moved, and I can second. And oh, sorry, on receipt of the delegation. Is anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. And management report's been moved, and I can second. And over to staff, or are there any questions on the management report? Seeing none, is anyone opposed to receipt? And that's carried. We have under reports, the Advisory Planning Commission minutes. I will move both if that's all right. Second. And seconded. Are there comments or questions on those minutes from Area B and the Agricultural Planning Commission? Hearing and seeing none. Is anyone opposed? And that's carried. Item number 2, Electoral Area B, Agricultural Land Reserve, non-adhering residential use for 2069 Coleman Road.
Madam Chair, but just before this is received, I'll just remove myself from the meeting, as my wife is the chair of the Agricultural Land Commission. I remove myself from these just in consideration of the perception of bias only. And James Warren will be here as the Deputy CAO.
Thank you. On receipt, motion from Director Grieve.
Second.
Seconded Director Arbor, and I will move it over to staff, to Jody. Thanks. Do you want to hit your light?
All right, thanks. So this is an Agricultural Land Commission applications. The options here are to forward the application to the Agricultural Land Commission with comments and recommendations, or to refuse the application. The applicant, Jonathan and Lila Armstrong, are online and they can speak that further to the application. They're seeking to begin construction of a new house while still living in an old house. Their intention is to demolish that old house on occupancy of the new house. Staff has confirmed with the Agricultural Land Commission that the upcoming regulatory changes coming into effect December 31st will not change the requirements for these type of applications. The Agricultural Advisory Planning Commission reviewed this application and recommended approval. The regional agrologist also reviewed and provided comments stating that they have no concerns regarding this application. The CBRD zoning bylaws actually do make provisions for this temporary occupation of an additional dwelling while constructing a new dwelling, and those are applicable to all zones across the region. Madam Chair, based on these factors, staff's recommending that the application be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission, supporting the proposal as proposed.
Thank you, Judy. And I see that the applicant, Jonathan, you're on the line. Is there anything you would like to add to that presentation?
I don't think so, but I'm available to answer any questions if there are any.
Great, thank you. I do have a question. There are changes to the ALR regulations around secondary homes on properties. When do those go into effect?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. This was to Jody. Sorry, but I will be asking you. Yeah.
Okay, so effective December 31st or January 1st, ALC will no longer require applications for secondary dwellings that are under 90 square meters.
Under 90 square meters. Okay, and this application, would that fit for the new home?
No, both dwellings are over 90 square meters.
Okay, okay. So then my question, I guess, is a little bit mute. I was wondering if the applicant was interested in keeping it, but it doesn't sound like it would be allowed to keep that second dwelling.
Thanks. No, we weren't interested in keeping the existing house.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Do the directors have any other questions? No, hearing and seeing none, I'll excuse the applicant from the table. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. And on receipt, is anyone opposed? And that is carried. We have recommendation. The recommendation's been moved. And I will second. On the recommendation to forward the application to the ALC, are there any comments or questions?
Madam Chair, just a minor thing. I wonder if the recommendation should reflect Coleman Road, 2069 Coleman Road in the first part of the recommendation.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Armstrong is the last name of the applicant.
We should maybe, well, amend that
Yeah.
recommendation.
Simple.
Does it need to be seconded? No, okay,
That's
thank
correct.
you. So the recommendation as amended, I don't see any, is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. Thank you. Item number 3, the Comox Valley Food Hub Feasibility Study for receipt.
Oversee.
Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
All right, thanks. So as you may recall, the province is assembling a food hub network consisting of regional food processing and innovation hubs. Members of the Comox Valley food and farming community have been supportive of establishing such a facility within the region, and the CVRD has been supportive of helping facilitate this initiative. Earlier this year, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries, with the assistance of the CVRD, funded a feasibility study for establishing such a hub here in the Comox Valley, and the result is Appendix A in your package. So generally, this feasibility study, it profiles the existing agriculture and food industry, identifies the gaps and opportunities, and makes some recommendations for a business model and strategy, including elements that should form part of the facility, necessary floor areas, and costs, and potential users and buyers. So specifically, this study recommends pursuing a producer-led for-profit cooperative ownership structure and utilize the currently vacant former dairy processing plant in Courtney. In your PDF package, page 93, the report concludes with a recommended implementation plan. The CVRD staff has consulted with the local participants in the feasibility study and confirmed that there does exist continued interest in pursuing implementation. It is staff's recommendation that the CVRD facilitate the proceeding with step 1 of that implementation plan. As described in page 93, step 1 involves reassembling the group to act as a steering committee volunteers. A group would, as part of those sub-steps, sub-step 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, seek partnerships, agreements with producers, businesses, and other groups, develop detailed costing of leasehold improvements and equipment and other costs, and seek initial funding commitments. It would also concurrently consider alternative means of facilitating food hub operations in the short term based on existing working assets that have potential to grow into a regional model that's envisioned by the BC Food Hub Network. Madam Chair, the steering committee, it would end in autumn 2022 with step 1.7, making a determination whether there exists the necessary conditions to continue with implementation under step 2. And step 2 and 3, those are about securing memberships and establishing a board of directors to take over. Thank you.
Thank you to staff. Directors, are there any questions? Director Grieve.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just have to say that Janine de La Salle and the steering group here have done a marvelous job. A lot of really good statistics in it that we've been looking for, and I'm sure they'll serve well when we move forward with our ag plan as well. I mean, you look at, Diane Jackson and Nikki Whitaker, Twyla Skinner. I mean, you've got Jerry McClintock, all the usual suspects are in there somewhere. I think that, the body of work that is in this 110 odd pages is pretty phenomenal. And I would just like to take the opportunity to thank all of the people involved for volunteering their time to move this forward. I think there's some really good opportunities here. Whether or not it comes to fruition in our fractious Comox Valley is another matter again, but at least maybe, is this our third trying out of Food Hub or the fourth? Well, anyway, if it's the third time, maybe third time lucky. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would qualify this as the most comprehensive effort to realizing a food hub.
I concur. I think this is our first proper kick at the can. Director Arbor. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely a comprehensive body of work for sure, and a lot of good data across the board. In terms of the recommendations and the next steps, I'm just wondering what we see as being the role of the CVRD in moving this forward. I know we'll need some pretty strong champions and people who actually pick this up to make it happen. I imagine that's not staff of the regional district, but what would be, now that this piece is completed, what would be the role of the Comox Valley Regional District in helping move this forward from here on out from the staff or consultants perspective?
Sorry, go ahead, Jody.
Yes, CVRD would provide a facilitation role. So we no longer have the consultant, Janine de La Salle, in Urban Food Strategies, working on it. It's going to be, the steering committee would have to consist of volunteers, and the volunteer effort will really drive this forward. CVRD would provide facilitation role in terms of administration and helping organization.
Yeah, it's my understanding, and I did see that in the report, that this facilitation and coordination would be the responsibility of the newly hired agricultural coordinator. Yeah, I'm seeing nods. Okay. Director Arbor, any further questions?
No, that's good, as long as it's well situated in a resource, because that's a big piece to try to keep volunteers together on, even though there'll be economic benefits to get this off the ground. I'm glad that we'll have some capacity to support the group in making this dream a reality. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Arbor. I too have a couple of questions. I think I noted the comment around pursuing an online platform first off in the first phase. Was one identified by the consultants, or is this something that the coordinator will have to research? Go ahead.
Yeah, that was something that was looked at. There's existing online platforms that are utilized variously across the region right now, and not 100% agreement on which one to go with. So yeah, it'd take more research on what one that's going to satisfy the various needs.
Okay, thank you. So that's going to be one of the roles of the steering committee. Did I read somewhere that would a director need to be a liaison on the committee? Was that an idea? No, it's going to stay as just a farmer-led.
Through Madam Chair to the directors, we did talk about whether or not this is a select committee or that this is a steering committee. And for the flexibility that we're looking for here and for the ownership within the community that we're seeking, you know, this really to be driven by those folks who will benefit from it, design from it. We opted to recommend to you that we use the steering committee model, so that does not require the appointment of a director. Certainly, however, I'm sure that the steering committee would welcome the advice and input and assistance to get, you know, on outreach and to get this seed nurtured and in the ground by elected officials. Great, thank you. Yeah, I want to concur with the comments of my fellow directors on the background and the research that the consultants were able to give us, which I think are going to dovetail so nicely with the Ag Plan. They've done a lot of our work for us, so I'm really grateful for that research. And I think this is not going to come as a surprise because I've made the statement before. I'm quite worried about the model of a producer-led cooperative that requires 200 farms to be members. And I think I can't even think of 50 produce and berry farms in the valley, let alone people who would be willing to commit financial funding. So I'm really glad to see that the steering committee will also look at alternative models, because I think if it requires, you know, that much a capitalization from the farming community, we may run into some quite big barriers. So the question is around a business plan that may require some additional resources beyond which the agricultural coordinator would have. I know the ministry has funding for things like that. ICE-T has funding to do business plan. Have staff considered that might be required, or is that something we could apply for? Through Madam Chair to the directors, I think Jody and I might tag team on this one, but I just wanted to make it very clear that staff is recommending to you that you authorize us to establish a steering committee that will use this feasibility study as the basis for next steps. So it's very much specific to the co-op producer model as an economic model. The reference in there to alternatives is not to suggest that we are thinking that the steering committee should go out and investigate alternative economic models, just to make that piece clear. And then Jody, if you had any comments on the second part of Chair Henry's question.
Hi. Yeah. So yeah, the part of the group's mandate there is going to have to be to seek those alternative funding sources, as you mentioned there. The second part, the steps 2 and 3 are making those commitments. So in this first step, we go and see if those necessary conditions exist. So is there sufficient funding? Is there sufficient buy-in for it? And then make at the end of the day, at the end of 1 year from now, make a recommendation. Is there going to be sufficient support right at that time to proceed? If there are those funding sources that can make it easier, that'd be the best. Yeah. And then on the alternatives, yeah. So through the whole process, lots of consultation was taking place, and what the report is on is what the consultant recommended as the best approach. It's not to say that the other approaches are not feasible. It's just that this was the recommended approach, and through those alternative means, those alternative strategies, those are looking at those kind of short-term means of keeping even if this does, at the end of the day, they decide not to pursue with a producer-led cooperative, that we still have a working assets in the community that can continue to crystallize something that can come together in the longer term.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. In that case, I am quite concerned about going down this road. It is a producer co-op model is probably one of the most difficult models to launch, having done that myself. And so I just want to make sure that the directors are aware of how difficult this is. There's a reason why cooperatives do not last for a long time. We don't have any cooperatives left in the Comox Valley. There used to be a vegetable marketing cooperative, but it's very, very difficult to keep them going. We don't have a lot of supports within the province for cooperatives when they start to fail. And it's a very heavy commitment for producers. Another option is a producer-led nonprofit. And so I just want to, I'm a little bit hesitant about putting all of our eggs into this basket, because in the end, I really just want to see a food hub here. I think there's so much interest and so much demand for that model. And I would hate to see it sort of fizzle once we, folks see some of the difficulties that the co-op model has. So I'm just going to make that statement now, and I'll let Director Grieve put his question forward.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, I don't think we should underestimate the energy and capacity of the local farmers. We have 416 farmers creating more than $33.6 million of first dollar money for the Comox Valley economy, and that was 2016. I'm going to pull the old Uncle Eddie historical context here again and to cast our minds back to 1904 when the Comox Valley farmers were having difficulty marketing milk. In those days, of course, they didn't have refrigeration like they do today, and so they decided to form a co-op, the Comox Valley Cooperative Creamery. And back in, I think, 1904, I know that Donald Grieve was the first president they elected. Everybody had to kick in, I think, $500 in 1904 dollars. And that ended up, of course, this is the irony, ended up being bought out by Fraser Valley Dairyland, and then eventually by Saputo. And now we're looking at the Comox Creamery building over behind the Driftwood Mall as an option. So it's kind of come full circle. We don't know what the future holds just by looking at the list of people on the original steering committee. And I understand we have to appoint a steering committee. And I know some of these people want to let their names stand again. So I would be interested in finding out. First question from staff is, how do we establish, do we go for a request for interest, or what is the procedure to strike the steering committee? Because I think it's going to be extremely important on the success of this endeavor.
Go ahead, Judy.
Yes, we've contacted the original members of the feasibility steering committee to see if there's interest in pursuing. We've gotten numerous responses back saying that yes, there is, that they would like to continue. So we got some names of people we'd like to, that they're interested in pursuing this. So we're gonna go forward with those. We don't need the board or anybody to formally appoint them.
Oh, good.
But they just, yeah, form part of the steering committee and pursue it as such.
And the last question is, I know it's a planning service budget is where the startup money is coming from. And I just, is that the entire Comox Valley or is that the electoral areas?
Through Madam Chair to the directors, Director Grieve, the initial seed money with the grant from the Ministry of Agriculture and then the staff time was coming from the Electoral Area Planning Service. I think to Director Arbor's earlier question about role, future, like short-term and then longer-term role for the CBRD, certainly if there was a medium or longer-term role that the board foresaw for the CBRD, then we would come back to you with some suggestions about where best to house something like a food hub. But for now, the study work and the administrative support side will be coming from the Electoral Area Planning Service, yes.
And of course, by approving this recommendation is basically kicking it down the road 1 year, and then they have to come back with either we proceed or is it drop dead in 1 year's time, correct? So there's no real big decision point except to delegate a committee or a steering committee to come up with the concept or not. So I'm definitely going to support this. I think it's well done. I think we have to put faith in the farming community, and we have to build bridges and make sure we're all singing from the same hymn book. Because in my short time in politics, the Comox Valley, believe it or not, seems to have a reputation of being very fractious. And of course, nothing scares our senior government funding more than any disagreement in the community. So thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. If I could just ask a bit of clarification around that timeline. Do staff have an idea when kind of a rough estimate of if this is a go, no go? Is a year what we're thinking of? So a food hub then would not be launched until 2023?
Correct. Yeah, we're thinking this would, even the scope of work they'd have to do, and that it's volunteers pursuing it, not their full-time job, that yes, it would figure to take at least into the summer, possibly fall of 2022 to be in a position to make a decision.
Sure. And in keeping in mind, many of these growers will be not available past April, probably. Yes. I just want to clarify as well around the steering committee, because I'm looking at the Food Hub Assessment Steering Committee, and I note that there were folks from Denman and Hornby who probably will not be moving forward. Lush Valley has their own site now. They're probably not going to be moving forward. There's no shellfish. So will the steering committee also open up to new members?
Yes, that's correct. So the original Food Hub Steering Committee, the feasibility version, used a version of a steering committee that has representatives of individual groups that come together and meet, and then they fan out information to their membership organizations. This version would be a little bit different in that these members would be more volunteers, and so we would don't necessarily need their mailing list to fan out. We need the actual work. So if they have members in their organizations that have the skills to pursue some of this, that would be very valuable to have them as members.
Great. Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions. On receipt, is anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried, and we have a recommendation.
I'll move the
Moved and
Second.
seconded by Director Arbor. Comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. I'm wondering if does people want to take a break and stretch legs for 5 minutes, and we will be right back. Is that all right? Or, yeah, okay. 5-minute stretch break, and we'll come back at 11:35. Are folks okay to come back? All right, I'm going to call us back to order because I know we still have a pretty lengthy agenda to get through. Next up on the agenda, we have item number 4, an update on the bylaw dispute adjudication system for receipt. Moved, and I can second, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Amanda Yusinski is here, our Manager of Bylaw Compliance, to present this report and answer any of your questions.
Over to Amanda.
Good morning through the CAO to the chair. This report reviews the bylaw dispute adjudication system as well as introduces draft ticketing bylaws. The adjudication system was first introduced to Electoral Area Service Committee in March of this year. The recommendations in part from that report were that the board endorse a bylaw dispute adjudication system and direct the preparation of bylaws, policies, and agreements for the implementation of the bylaw dispute adjudication system, and that the board directs staff to work with the Court Services Branch of the Ministry of Attorney General to request the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act apply to the Comox Valley Regional District. Following that committee meeting, staff did formally apply to have the CVRD included as a local government permitted to administrate the adjudication system. And I'm pleased to report that on July 14th of this year, the CVRD received written approval from the Attorney General's office that we were able to join the adjudication program. So we are now officially registered. The MTI system, or Municipal Ticket Information System, that we're currently using does not support effective and cost-efficient compliance or represent best practices in bylaw enforcement currently. Under the MTI system, tickets must be personally served, and if not paid, disputed tickets can only be resolved within provincial court through a payment hearing. In the case of the CVRD, this means bylaw staff must apply for a hearing date in provincial court, liaise with the disputant, sometimes several times, direct the collection of evidence from bylaw staff and witnesses, serve legal documents, and argue the case representing the regional district in provincial court before a judge or judicial justice of the peace. Increasingly, local government bylaw matters are not a priority for the provincial court system and are regularly delayed for more serious matters, resulting in added costs and inconveniences to witnesses and staff. When this happens, quite often we will lose our witnesses or they lose interest altogether. Delays can often be up to 6 months for a trial date and often are delayed even longer if something more pressing comes up for the courts. This can even happen the day of our trial, and we experienced this this year. The provincial court matter that we filed in September of 2020. We're just going back to court this week, a year later on that matter. Although ticketing for bylaw infractions is a tool that is proven to enhance compliance with local government regulations, the requirement for personal service of tickets, the high cost of court prosecutions, and the difficulty in collecting fines owing are detriments to the use of the ticketing system. The Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act was created to address just these issues and to create a streamlined framework through a non-judicial system for local governments to deal with bylaw infractions, compliance terms, and ticket disputes. The Act was developed to create a simple, fair, and cost-effective system for dealing with minor bylaw infractions by the creation of a localized dispute forum dedicated to resolving local bylaw matters. So with the adjudication system, once we apply for dates, and that's at our discretion, we have available to us a roster of local adjudicators provided by the province. Also, a reduction to the cost and complexity of decision-making in that forum. The adjudication process is considerably more informal. It can be held in this room. It can be held over the phone, in writing, and I think more commonly now through Zoom, which is a bit more inviting and available to our residents as well. Avoidance of unnecessary attendance of witnesses and the involvement of legal counsel. I just want to be clear, it's not required, but disputants are still welcome to have legal representation if they wish. Reduction in the length of time required to resolve bylaw ticket disputes. So adjudications will be booked as we needed and no more court delays. And the elimination of the requirement for personal service. The tickets can be mailed or in a few of our instances with parking violations within our parks, the ticket could be left on the vehicle, which is something we don't have the ability to do at the moment. Each local government participating in the adjudication system must pay their own costs. The cost to operate the adjudication system will be accommodated easily within the existing budget set out for each of our services. So I've worked it out through North Shore adjudication and City of Nanaimo. Each case on average is about $55 in adjudication costs and administration costs, compared to at least a couple thousand per MTI at the moment. So it's a considerable cost reduction and time. Bylaw staff took the time when drafting the attached adjudication ticketing bylaw to discuss and even meet with other local governments who have been utilizing the adjudication system and screening officer program. This resulted in a bylaw that we feel fits the needs of the CVRD bylaw department and is in line with our compliance approach that we've had such good success with and process for administering tickets. The draft bylaw attached outlines the process that the CVRD can undertake to see a disputed ticket through a screening process and then on to adjudication if the matter cannot be resolved by the ticket being paid or a compliance agreement being entered. So at the point of screening, the screening officer would have the ability to enter and offer a compliance agreement. So say for an unsightly property, this is the ticket amount owing. If you would clean the property within a set amount of time, the ticket may be waived or it may not. But it's getting compliance. I think the buy-in from someone to agree to that is something they're less likely to be in violation again in the future. It's not being imposed on them. They're in agreement with it. The Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act outlines very specifically what a local government may require through their adjudication ticketing bylaw and screening process. We have taken care to ensure that the draft bylaw is consistent with all points of the Act. Currently, the bylaw department utilizes an informal screening process when a ticket has been issued. So that's our current municipal ticket information system. If someone disputes, we do have them in. We go through all the evidence available, photos, written documentation, staff observations. If they still choose to dispute, at least they know what evidence we have moving forward. Quite often at this stage, even currently, even though it's not a formal process, people are paying their tickets. This includes many of the elements that are outlined in the adjudication ticketing bylaw, and we're pleased to have these steps become more of a formal process. A communication plan has been created to educate residents on the new program, highlighting the value, cost effectiveness, and process available to the community, as well as increasing awareness to bylaw services overall. The draft plan is attached to this report as Appendix C. The recommendations on this report are that the board give first and second reading to bylaw number 679, being Comox Valley Regional District Bylaw Adjudication Ticketing Bylaw, attached as Appendix A to the staff report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on this one.
Thanks so much, Amanda. I know I'll speak for the directors. The amount of time and research you've put into this is really appreciated. And I love the idea that we are not only modernizing, but making a system that's both cost effective and hopefully increases compliance. So thanks to that. I don't see any questions from either of the directors. Oh, director, that always prompts someone, so.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to reinforce your words. I think it's really important that we move in this direction because it's more equitable, it's fair, and it's definitely not going to create the same kind of burden on the court system that we really don't need right now. So, thank you.
Great, thanks. So on receipt, is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, that's carried. We have a recommendation. I can move.
Second.
Seconded. Comments or questions on the recommendation to move to first and second reading? Hearing and seeing none. Anyone opposed? And that is carried. Thanks, Amanda. We have the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Local Service Area Connection suspension for receipt.
Receipt.
No.
Madam Chair, Director Grieve, Chris Lorry is just going to give an update to the board as to the status of this. Just
okay.
Is that okay?
I always second that so that we move it to the table. Thanks. And over to staff, to Chris.
Good morning, through the chair to the committee. Yeah, so this report was placed on the EASC agenda in anticipation of taking it through the Black Creek Oyster Bay Committee Services meeting this morning. Started at 8:30. So that report was summarized and discussed at length with the apologies for that, with the committee, but it was deferred to the next meeting, which will take place on or around October 4th. So that's it certainly reflects an urgent situation in the water service area. So we hope to progress the matter at that meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions or support any discussion at this morning's meeting.
Okay, so it sounds like there's not going to be any decisions or anything from this table until the Black Creek Oyster Bay Committee meets.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Yeah, I think it was felt at the committee that we needed more information, and there was there's a lot of extrapolation on future growth in that area, which may or may not be actually occurring at this point. We made it through an extremely dry, drought-ridden summer. So I would say that we're still under the gun, but I'm presuming if all the climate predictions are correct, that we are going to experience a milder, wetter winter. So it does stem from a capacity issue. I did find out that the 1,100 odd connections are all metered, as we know, in electoral areas, and also that they are extremely prudent and frugal with their water use, probably the most off the island, I'm sure, off the islands. And it's quite a discussion, being that we just spent all that time and energy on a third well in the park, and the well is not producing to the level that had been hoped. So there's some discussion on whether the water tables are going down or not, and so we're going to probably come back and have the author of the hydrology report come and give a little presentation to clarify some of these issues and what's our best next step forward for the water system. But paramount on all of this is the fact that we have to ensure that the users on the system are going to be serviced properly over and above any future connections. So I see it moving forward, but maybe it needs a little more explanation, a little more thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. Director Arbor, do you have any questions? Okay. Hearing and seeing none on receipt. Is anyone opposed? And that's carried. Moving on, Union Bay Water Service Budget Amendment for the 3rd Street Water Main Extension for receipt.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you very much. And Chris LaRose is here to explain this particular report and the recommendation and answer any questions.
Go ahead, Chris.
Great, thank you. Through the CAO and through the chair. So yeah, this is a brief report on your agenda to recommend an amendment to the financial plan for the newly converted Union Bay Water Service area. So this request was initiated by a property owner approaching the CVRD and requesting connection to the Union Bay system. So actually that request, it was actually initiated just before the conversion, and the owner is located at 5597 3rd Street. So shortly after that request was received, we did identify that there was several leaks on this section of main servicing, I guess, the closest section of main to the requesting property. So we were familiar with this one. So the actually contemplated attaching a photo of the leak to the report, just given the condition of the line. We're looking at an 1.5-inch line coming down 3rd Street from Douglas. It's about a 90-meter section. so far undersized for, for today's standards, and polyline as well, and then feeding a hodgepodge of fittings that split into the 4 properties at the end of that road. So needless to say, we're not in a position to be able to extend that main without first upsizing that section from Douglas. So what we're proposing to do here is to extend, replace that 1.5-inch line with a modern 6-inch, so the minimum size line, 6-inch line from Douglas all the way down to the end of the road, and then recover the section that fronts the property, the requesting property, recover that section of the cost from the property owner. The balance, so the 46,800 estimated, would be covered by the service. So the amending amount is the total, but with the 46,800 coming from reserves in the service, and then the balance coming from the property owner. And as I noted in the final bullet, this would leave the reserves for the service at roughly the $480,000 mark, which is not unhealthy for a service of this size.
Thanks, Chris. Can I ask if the property owner at 5597 has been made aware of the cost and they're okay with the cost?
Yes, yeah, agreed. Yeah, and there is some potential that the neighboring property, so the one immediately beyond them on 3rd Street, may be anticipating or expecting to develop at some point in the near future. So we've encouraged 5597 to reach out to that property owner to see if there's potential some cost sharing for them. But yeah, he's eager to have the connection and understands the costs.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Director Arbour.
Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering if we can defer this decision in the how urgent it is, or whether we could wait. We only have one more meeting planned for the advisory group, and I noticed that this item would be distributed to them, but we're literally like 6 days away from that meeting, and then we have an ESC at the beginning of October, and I think for changes to the budget so far, we've consulted with them and got some good community input from them. So I'm just wondering if you're planning to do that work in the next 2 weeks, or whether it could wait one more ESC for us to pass this and get their input.
Yeah, so I certainly appreciate or understand the request. At this point, we are approaching the end of the viable construction season, and really what drives it at this time of year is the shutdown of the asphalt plant. So, which occurs weather dependent, but some point, starting in early November. So, time is definitely of the essence if we're going to get the work done and completed before that asphalt plant shut down in early November. So a 2-week delay at this point would certainly affect our ability to deliver it before the winter starts. That being said, if this is our constraint, we'll work around it.
Okay, well, based on that advice, maybe we can consider it today, but if we can send that rationale to the advisory group along with the general budget for why we moved this before the meeting, that might save us a little bit of time at the meeting going through that if they have a staff explanation, and then I can speak to why I supported this today. So thanks for the answer. It does seem like there's a timeliness to doing the works.
Thanks, Director Arbour. I don't see any other questions. So on receipt, is anyone opposed? And that is carried. We have a recommendation. Moved.
Second.
And seconded that the approved budget be amended, and that the contribution come from the capital works and the contribution from the property owner at 5597 3rd Street. Comments or questions on the recommendation? Hearing and seeing none. Anyone opposed? And that's carried. Great. Item number 7, Arden Road, boundary discrepancy for receipt.
Receipt.
Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Daniel May, Parks Planner, will present this report and answer any of your questions.
Welcome, Daniel. You just have to.
Madam Chair, the purpose of this staff report is to provide information regarding a boundary discrepancy that was identified along Arden Road between the Comox Valley Regional District and the City of Courtenay. Some sort of history. Historically, the City of Courtenay has maintained a trail within the unopened portion of the Arden Road dedication adjacent to Masters Greenway Park. This trail connects to the city's rotary Riverside Trail infrastructure, which runs along the Puntlands River to First Street. In 2019, the City of Courtenay identified a possible boundary discrepancy that would place the trail within the CBRD. CBRD mapping showed the westerly boundary of the Arden Road dedication as a city boundary, while the City of Courtenay mapping showed it to be the easterly boundary of Arden Road. The province was engaged to review and clarify the legal boundaries. The province produced a memorandum, which is an appendices to this report, that identified historical mapping inconsistencies and recommends an adjustment to the boundary between Courtenay and Puntledge Black Creek Electoral Area C, adjacent to Masters Greenway. The province recommends that the easterly boundary of the unopened Arden Road dedication be the boundary, thereby placing this 260 meters of trail in the CVRD. The city supports this decision and has no objections to the CVRD taking over maintenance of the trail. The CVRD will work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to obtain a permit to manage and maintain the trail located within the Arden Road dedication in conjunction with the Masters Greenway Trail Network. This report is presented for information only.
Thanks very much. Director Grieve has a question.
A little bit tongue in cheek. It's hard to see with the mask on, but this is interesting because we have a few of these issues between jurisdiction over parks. I'm wondering on Lake Trail Road, there's Capes Park, and it seems to me that it's, if I remember correctly, it's not in the City of Courtenay, but they mow the lawn. And I believe that we've got the trailhead at the Royston Seaside Trail that is now taken into the City of Courtenay. It was annexed into the city a few years ago, but we still mow the lawn. So I don't know if you can comment on that. It should be a lot easier if we had a unified kind of a regional district park service that could take care and coordinate, you know, for all the greenways and trailways. But do you know anything about the Royston Seaside Trail?
I know a little bit, even though I haven't personally been maintaining that one.
Look at the mark.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm actually not really aware of that issue that you talked with the Royston Seaside Trail. I know that this one was brought up by the city because they've been historically maintaining it, and then they kind of found out that there was this discrepancy with the boundaries, and then they kind of wanted to just kind of move that over. So this one we actually did go to the province and try to figure out what that actual historical boundary is, and the province does confirm that it is within the regional district. So the idea here is that we would then take on that as part of the Masters Greenway network and maintain it.
Can I ask if there's going to be any kind of budgetary implication for taking over the maintenance of this area?
Yeah, Madam Chair, there will be extra budget because we will need to maintain this 260 meters of trail. It's fairly small though in terms of budget requirements because we are maintaining the adjacent Greenways Park.
Thank you. I see Director Arbor's got a question.
Thanks. To me, it seems like this proposal runs counter to our RGS in the sense that that very area in our RGS is slated around Arden Road to move over to the municipality as an expansion area. And I mean, I know there's been unnecessary and weird expansions, such as the ridge or the area north of Costco taken in by the city of Courtney, which in my opinion should have stayed in as rural areas. But those around Arden are clearly historical density neighborhoods fully connected to the city of Courtney. And RGS rightly identified that there's, that over time, these areas should move over to the city of Courtney and provide servicing appropriately. So it's funny to me, even though it's a small parcel, that we're going to go the other way on this. We're gonna take over responsibility for the maintenance of an area that is slated over time to be part of the city. As you say, you're not asking us for a decision. It's fine. I'm just maybe highlighting the bigger picture, which I think Director Grieve and myself are quite aware of in regards to those residences and neighborhoods, and what the RGS says about them.
Thanks, Director Arber. I don't know, staff want to comment on that, but I see Director Grieve has a question.
My tongue's still in between my cheek here. Well, just for Director Arber's information, in Area A, the aforementioned trailhead of the Royston Seaside Trail was purchased by our Parks Department for $180,000. And within, I think, 2 months, the city of Courtney claimed it in an annexation. We didn't get as much as a mayor's seat. But I would like to extend a thank you to the city of Courtney on behalf of the residents of Area C for this addition to our greenways. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. I don't see any more questions on receipt. Is anyone opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Item number 8, naming of a park in Morrison Creek headwaters for receipt.
Good.
Moved and second, and over to staff.
Thank you. And Daniel May will present this report and answer any of your questions.
Madam Chair, purpose of this report is to seek support for an Indigenous name for the Comox Valley Regional District Managed Conservation Area in the Morrison Creek headwaters. Through a partnership with the Comox Valley Land Trust, a parcel of land within the Morrison Creek headwaters was acquired in 2019 to serve as conservation lands. Upon acquisition, staff reached out to the Comox First Nation to see if there was interest in naming the recently acquired park. On July 21st, 2021, KFN Chief and Council meeting, KFN suggested the name Kwach Mount for the park, which means lots of medicine. This is in reference to the abundance of Indigenous medicinal plants in the area. The CVRD policy on the naming of public facilities supports the Indigenous name as it is in an area of cultural significance to the KFN. The Comox Valley Land Trust, a partner in the ownership of the land of the CVRD, supports the name Kwach Mount Conservation Area. And the recommendation from the Chief Administrative Officer is that the name Kwach Mount Conservation Area be adopted for the Comox Valley Regional District Park, located within the Morrison Creek headwaters, as outlined in the staff report dated September 13th, 2021.
Thank you to staff. And I see a question from Director Arber. I just want to comment that I appreciate the naming by the Comox First Nation. I really look forward to pronouncing it properly, but also acknowledging the importance of that area and the meaning behind the name. So, Director Arber.
Yeah, actually, same. And to hear, place names is always great. The place where there's lots of medicine, that's kind of neat. I know on the West Coast too, many of the places, headwaters and things like that, bog areas, similar sources of medicine. So thank you to Comox First Nation for suggesting that, and I'm definitely in favor as well.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions on receipt. Is anyone opposed? And that's carried. And the recommendation is that the name Kwach Mount Conservation Area be adopted for the Comox Valley Regional District Park. Moved, and I can second. Any opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Item number 9, update on the public access to the Solom and Puntlands Rivers for swimming for receipt. Moved, and I can second, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Brian Allert, Parks Technician, is here to present the report and answer any of your questions.
Thanks, Brian, and go ahead.
Good morning, through the CEO and the Chair. We're continuing some discussions that we had in 2020, 21. At that time, we were looking at protecting and improving river access along the Solom. And the outcome of those discussions was that we were looking at providing some parking at the end of Dove Creek Place beside the exhibition grounds. And we worked with the city on being able to create some stalls there at the end of the road. The city wasn't really in favor of it, so that idea kind of died at that point. But with the master plan underway for the exhibition grounds, we are trying to see if we're able to fit in some parking again at the end of the road there, but that would be within the exhibition grounds. So that idea is still something we're working on. So this morning we wanted also to talk about accesses along the Puntlands River. And within the report on Appendix B, there's a map there that identifies some of the locations that the public is using now to access the Puntlands. These include some road right-of-ways, but we also have Nymph Falls Park, where there's about 26 different spots where you can get down to the water and go for a swim. Only one of those is an actual improved access where we put some stairs down to the river. So most of those are just locations where people have shown up and identified a nice spot to swim and made a path on their own down to their water. And then BC Hydro also has a number of locations along the river. And this week we'll be opening up the water treatment plant, as you know. And as part of that facility, there's now going to be parking and access to the river from that location. So that's going to help provide maybe some relief for the Plateau Road residents, because we are getting some feedback from them that there's quite a bit of traffic on Plateau Road in the summertime. And they're finding that that traffic makes it more difficult for them to walk or cycle on the road, just because of the number of vehicles and the speed at which they're going. So that's one issue that we kind of came up with when we started looking at improving access at Nymph Falls, is there's going to be a need to kind of manage the volumes of people that are coming to the park to enjoy the swimming. So the recommendations there that we have at the top of page 4, they identified perhaps through the master plan that we're working on for Nymph Falls is to work with BC Hydro and try and identify some locations where we could improve access either within Nymph Falls Park or within the hydro lands. This might include additional parking or picnic facilities or just better access down to the water. So that's something that we could take on next year as part of that master plan. We could also identify one or more sites where we want to do some more research, where we could talk to adjacent property owners, possibly some of the agencies that we involve, like the Comox First Nations or Fisheries and Oceans or the City of Courtenay, and work with them to see if we can identify ways to improve some of those other accesses. Or we can just kind of sit back and see how things change in the valley in terms of the demand for access and where people want to be able to get to the water, and focus on other park priorities in the meantime. Because at this point in our 5-year parks budget, there is no money that has been designated for improving river accesses. So if we did want to make this a priority, then that's something we'd have to look at within the budget as well. So at this point, staff are recommending that we kind of look at the issue as part of the Nymph Falls master plan and potentially partner with BC Hydro on some improvements.
Thanks, Brian. Before I move it over to Director Grieve, I just want to actually thank Director Grieve for keeping this item on the management report for so long. It's something that I know he championed, and I think all of us have seen, you know, in the heat of this past summer, how important river access was. So thank you to Director Grieve, and I know I'll be supporting even more access, but I will turn it over to Director Grieve for his question.
Well, thank you. I think it might be award-winning, actually, you know, how long it's been on the management report, but I know there was some reluctance by the city of Courtenay to engage on this. So has that changed now with staff down there?
Going to Duck Creek Place, is that?
Well, they're talking about, you know, things like, you know, the old Reese Bridge, you know, because it's in the city, they decided to terminate the old road, and rather than take it down to the river, you know, they built a cul-de-sac, and it was, I think the planning at the time didn't really want people going down to the river at that point, you know, that area. But we have seen, you know, I did work with Ashley Cousins, I think, from the Ministry of Transport on this, and she came up with a bunch of points, you know, along Duck Creek Road, even where traditional swimming holes have had barbed wire put up and private property signs put up on what is clearly either Flinroe or Ministry of Transport property. So, you know, I was looking to you know, whether or not there's any swimming opportunities along the Solom on the old Duck Creek Road. But, you know, I understand, you know, with climate change and everything, the Solom River isn't what it used to be. And but it was always a good spot in the day to, you know, to go swimming, say, in May or June, because the river warmed up quite a bit faster than the Puntlands did. But, you know, I understand that, you know, there's reluctance by adjacent property owners to, you know, there's always that thing we experience with road ends on the foreshore of the ocean where, you know, somebody builds a tool shed and puts private property signs right on the right of way. So, you know, we have to take baby steps here, and I see what you're doing and I commend it, but I don't know. I mean, I think we have to have a long-term lens on this and delineate where the access points are, because, you know, if we don't keep them public, they will in fact become virtually private property. So that's just a word of caution. I think that, you know, it was recognized too by ministry that that people who do access these unofficial spots tend to park on the road and cause all kinds of problems as well, right? Much like all our parks, I guess, in Falls and whatever. But, you know, it's good to see it moving forward in some degree here. And I do commend you for taking it on, because, as I say, I think it goes back, well, certainly 5 years, 6 years when we first had this conversation. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Director Grieve. I had a question around a few of the points on the map that were highlighted as site map open, but also potential unknown. So if we were to ask staff to look into that, is that the budget requirement that you're contemplating? They seem to be, you know, access points, but we're not sure how, if the access is okay. Do you know if, does staff know if any of those are public right of ways? Go ahead. No, it was.
Just say over to the chair. So we know where the accesses are, and in most of the cases where you see the red dots, it's difficult to get down to the water. So okay, even though it's open to the public, they really can't use it because it's steep or very overgrown. Where the sites are open but not in use, again, like Masters, you can get down to the river, but it's a difficult scramble and not something that we want to really encourage people to be doing in that location. And the unknown ones, yeah, we would need to spend more time on the ground just to get a better sense of what the conditions are at those locations. They're fairly overgrown, so it's even difficult to tell exactly where the right of way is at this point on those ones.
Okay, thanks. I see Mark also has his light on.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify that the report was looking at public accesses. So it was looking at our existing parks and then at public road dedication. Now, public road dedication, those accesses to water are obtained through subdivision. And I think historically, those road accesses, no one went out to look to see if it's actually feasible to get to that water on that road dedication. So I think a lot of these public road dedications, it's actually very difficult to get to the water. So either it's a really steep bank or there's some corrosion issues or there's other things like that that are a concern. So even though there is public access, the access largely on those road dedications is difficult.
Thanks for that clarification. Director Arbor?
Yeah, I'm of two minds on this report. One is just the logic of it is good. Nim Falls obviously has got some parking issues. But at the same time, as I start thinking about exhibition grounds and I start thinking about the bigger picture, here we are basically investing towards more automobile use to access those areas. And of course, the more parking you put in, the more you'll have people going because the convenience of it will be there. And I think that's definitely true for the lowered Solom, which right now is probably best qualified as lightly used. You kind of have a walk-in to the lowered Solom from usually people, I guess, park beside the curling club or whatnot. And then my mind goes to how do we tie this to our climate objectives? So maybe I'm sure I'll make some of the staff's eyes rolled here, but or maybe my colleague, some of my colleagues as well. But if we put in parking, could it be for EV only? Or do we want to just keep adding more power parking in rural areas and not addressing the carbon footprint that goes along with it? Is it enough for me to not vote in favor of either recommendation? I think we need to think differently. You know, I think we, yeah, it basically, let's be real. This facilitates more car access into our parks. And the more you put in, the more people will come. I'm not sure that's the direction we want to go in. I also understand the logic of in a place like Nim Falls where, you know, you're flowing with cars for much of the summer. And then what's the carrying capacity of those parks over time, right? So if you add those spots and those parking spots and more people come, do we start to reduce the experience for those who are there? Those are, you know, in a way philosophical questions, but they're also budget questions around where we put our money. I would be more excited if we were actually putting those money towards active transportation into those areas rather than parking for cars. Tomorrow we're going to receive a comprehensive active transportation network plan. So would I prefer to put 100 grand into car parking at our parks or 100 grand into trails and bicycle lanes that lead us to those parks? For sure, I would choose the latter. So my observations, I'll reserve my thoughts for the votes. Thanks.
Director Arbor, Director Grieve.
Director Arbor, just bring your attention that the portion of Area C west of the Solom River does not even pay into the transit service. Thank you.
Thanks for that. You know, I hear Director Arbor's comments about, you know, the type of use being very car dependent and what we're, you know, what we eventually will get if we start putting in parking spots. I do note, though, that the exhibition grounds do have a great trail network already, and that if we were to direct staff to have it more bike friendly and walking friendly, is the improvement at the exhibition grounds site primarily a parking improvement that we're talking about, or is it, access to the actual water? If you can remind me what that was. I'll go to Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Director Amir. I think we wanted to kind of clarify that the exhibition grounds, what was being recommended here was part of the redevelopment plans. So anything that happens within the exhibition grounds will be recreation staff. That's not under the Parks and Greenways service. That's under the exhibition function under 600. So right now, the redevelopment plan is just showing some potential parking down at the end of Dove Creek Place for people to park and then have easier access to the Solom River. So the proposal, I think, that is being brought forward is that we could look at parking at the end of Dove Creek Place as part of the exhibition grounds redevelopment plan. So we wouldn't. I'm not entirely sure of the ins and outs of the redevelopment plan, so I'm not sure if it actually has improvements in there to the trail system or not, because it's not under the kind of Parks and Greenways function. It's under the recreation function. And then just if I can just comment on what Director Arbour was bringing forward about the Nymph Falls, I think the overcapacity issues, I think that we're already there. That the current parking at Nymph Falls just cannot handle the current load. And I think that's pretty obvious if you go down the Forbidden Plateau Road, and every summer you'll just see it's plugged full with cars. So I think if we were to explore parking in there, I don't know if we're actually going to be adding additional users to that space. And again, I think all we're seeking here in the recommendation is that the parking get explored as part of the management planning process. So there's nothing in this report to say that we will be looking at increasing parking, but just that it gets explored as part of the whole management planning process.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. I think maybe the directors are still kind of contemplating how to move forward. So maybe just on receipt, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to receipt? And that's carried. And we have some recommendations, and staff have sort of clarified that, this is more still exploratory, that we wouldn't be looking at actual implementation of any kind of parking access but that it be included, funding be included in budgets so that the plans could be more robust. Director Arbour.
I think I'd be more in favor of supporting the recommendation if as part of exploring public access, in addition to looking at the parking issue, that the active transportation component be explored as well alongside. And maybe that lives elsewhere, that currently lives under planning, I guess. But yeah, I'd be willing to move forward with those recommendations if we add the active transportation element as well.
Okay, and Director Grieve? Sorry.
Well, if you want me to pile on that, what about maybe exploring delivering public transit to the rural areas?
Okay, we don't have any motion though, so how would directors like to proceed? Director Arbour, do you want to move the recommendation that includes active transportation component? You're still muted.
No, I know, I'm not even talking. I'm working on it. That staff be directed to explore improvements to public access to swimming along the Puntlands River within Nymph Falls and adjacent BC hydrolands as part of Nymph Falls management planning process. Fine with that. It doesn't reference parking, so it can include all the options, including parking, including active transportation, including transit, although Nymph Falls is a stretch, as Dr. Grieve and I probably know. However, it's not as much of a stretch for the exhibition grounds, which is definitely the same problem as the rest of our rec facilities, which is that public transit does not run really well in those areas. So that staff be directed to explore public access as well within the Comox Valley exhibition grounds to improve swimming access to the lower Solom River.
Okay, I can second that. So I don't know if staff got that that adjustment. So we're taking out the explore parking improvements specifically to the second item. So
yeah, and maybe even the adjacent to Dove Creek Road.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to improve swimming access to lower Solom River.
So that's moved and seconded. Any comments on that motion? And Director Grieve?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are actually addressing a subscription of the Nymph Falls area. The parking issue is real for the residents there. I hear about it quite a lot. You know, and of course it's a bigger issue than all of those things. I do think that, you know, we can't limit this so much. It's obviously it'd be great to have, you know, equestrian access as well to all the trails. We know where we're going insofar as what we want to see for greenways and trailways, and we'll probably be bringing it up as part of our discussion next week. But yeah, I mean, I think the focus is on swimming, and people are going to go swimming anyway. So, you know, whether or not we actually formalize some of this stuff or not, it's going to happen anyway. So I think, you know, we need a shot of reality in this. Thanks.
Director Arber, did you have another question?
Yeah, just one last comment. I mean, I agree in the end with the need, but it's just, I was in Salmon Arm a couple of years ago before the pandemic, and they have this amazing salmon run, but you know, it's grown so successful because everybody goes to see it, and now the parking is like massive. It's like this massive parking, and you know, the valley will continue to grow, and with the heat waves we're experiencing, there's gonna. I was at Nymph Falls a few times this summer to go for a swim, so I'm keenly aware of the parking issue, but I think if we just keep building parking, eventually we'll just have a park full of parking. And the more we build parking, the more people will come, and people will still park on the road, I believe, because it'll become more popular. So it's a tough one, right? It's a tough one to solve. But it's also distant. That's the problem with Nymph Falls. We're probably not going to have transit up there. I think there's more opportunities for sound planning around the Lower Solom and the Puntlands, which is obviously in Courtenay, but for Nymph Falls, what is the solution? And as staff even looked at access from the other side of the river, I've never looked at whether that's feasible or what exists there, but it's a question I have. So anyways, I'm happy with the recommendations. I think they've gotten our comments today as well. So I don't need to talk more about it, I guess.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call the question then. On receipt of that, or sorry, on the recommendation as first and seconded, is anyone opposed? And that is carried. Thanks. And we have one more item. Actually, no, there's going to be some other items after this. So no, item number 10, the rural community grant. Oh, before we move forward, do folks want to have lunch first, or do you want to come get through this? You're okay? Director Arber, are you okay to keep going?
I don't have lunch, so I have a preference to keep going.
Okay, all right, let's go. Item number 10 then, the rural community grant consideration for receipt. Moved, and I can second, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And I'll just ask Kevin DeVell to give a bit of a summary as to what we have here, and Lisa can help us go through these proposals and seek your guidance.
Great, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to the directors, good afternoon.
So in front of you today are some additional rural community grant requests that have come forward since our last go around. So these are here for your consideration, and staff has provided their recommendations as to how we may want to move forward with some of these. What we have provided in the report for your information under Appendix B is just kind of where our community grant fund summary is to date. So you can see there, with all of the applications that have been approved rather to date, we have across all of the electoral areas approximately $58,000 remaining for the 2021 calendar year. So the recommendations are based on the funding that is currently remaining, and also based on the recommendation specifically with respect to the Hornby Island request to ensure that that is in line with the decision that this committee had made previously with respect to a similar request from Denman Island. So just bringing that forward on behalf of General Manager Doug Marzo, who was unable to be here today, but certainly happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you. Directors, do you have any questions or comments from Kevin's report? And sorry, Director Arbor, I can't see your hand, so just speak up if.
Yeah, I have. Thank you. So yeah, and I was glad to see the Mars application. I have to say that I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to go on one of these tours with the Hornby school group, and it was awesome. It was just like for the kids and just even for the volunteers and the people who were there. So happy to help contribute to that one for sure, and the other ones as well that are on the docket. But the other ones, I think some of them are more specific. I can't see them anymore because I think I just see a general slide about all of our grants right now that's up on the screen.
So would you be able to pull up this one? Okay, we'll try and just pull up the ones that we're considering.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have my agenda. I've been relying on what on the agendas that we're showing. But even then, from memory, I know that they were all good applications. Thank you. In regards to the Hornby one, that is a big ask, and we did have a decision on that based on number of requests, and I did ask to see if we could revisit this one. I realize the staff is recommending against. Well, the first observation I would make is the budget is too big. I see I have 12,000 left in the Hornby budget, and but I think what I wrote in asking for reconsideration around this one is two things. I think that I think are worthy of mention. One is that when we said we're not funding the housing societies because they're not in our housing service, and but then I made the comment that it's in a way it's bizarre too, because they're the only type of nonprofits on the islands that we won't fund. I don't think that we have rationales other than those that we fund through normal services, but it's the only groups that we would make the case that we don't fund because they're not in our housing service or it's Islands Trust. And with housing being the biggest issue on the islands, I struggle with that. Now, you are aware that I'm bringing forward or working with towards strategic planning and otherwise to look at a housing feasibility, perhaps for the islands. But in the interim, in this particular application, I guess we turned down 3 groups in the spring, and then I had a meeting with this group, and what I realized is the septic upgrade not only assists with existing homes and is really needed, but it will also allow them to start more earnestly towards adding, I think, 4 to 6 more units. The Denman one that is referred to as a precedent setting, so to speak, is they don't have a project yet. They're very early days. This one actually have units that are serviced by the septic system, and this would allow them to add units. So as a temporary measure until we figure out whether there will be housing support to the islands through the CVRD, and I'm hoping we'll know that in the next year or two. I'd like to contribute maybe for half the amount for 10,000. So I'm happy for more staff input and my colleagues' input, but I had a hard time justifying to them why we would not support a request like this. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Arbor. And if it helps, I was also considering, sharing in that Mars ask. So if you wanted to save your dollars for the Hornby Island Housing Society, that would be fine with me too. Director Grieve has a comment or a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Only that, just to reiterate the fact that as electoral area directors at the Fisher-Price level of government that we find ourselves, this is our only discretionary money that we can channel through. And I think it was discussed at UBCM last week, the value of the nonprofits, the societies, the faith-based groups in all manner of local government endeavors and how we need them so to actually deliver a lot of these things. So I'm very happy, and I want to say to staff that I'm glad we've transitioned through to the rural community grant format here. And I once again rejoice in the fact that we have a little bit of control over spending a little bit of our money in our areas to help support these incredible volunteer groups that we have. So, whatever comes out of this, going forward, I see that, it's going to be pretty intact. We're going to have a little more discussion in the public, which is just absolutely fine. But at the end result is we are going to be able to, continue supporting the groups that make things actually happen in the Comox Valley. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. So I'm wondering if we want to go item by item, or does staff have a?
Just a word of caution, and it's not suggesting a hard and fast no, but I think the housing initiative is an example where it is a complex, long-term commitment of an organization. And at what point should the regional district be saying, this is a service, this is not just us providing a modest assistance here, there. And the other thing is that by normalizing grants being provided to assist in this housing, which you yourself say is one of the most important or biggest services for the islands, you're creating an expectation that maybe there's not a need for a service and we'll never go there. Remembering a service has a very distinct and extensive consultation with the public to ensure that before you go down the road of creating or establishing it, there's some level of support from the community. So it's not a hard and fast no, don't do this. We realize that housing on the islands is important, but I think this, if it is what you say it is, the sooner we come to the realization that it should be a service and we help the community to support that, the better, as opposed to fairly substantial grants for fairly substantial important aspects of their being.
Thanks, Sir Russell. Director Arbor, did you still have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. I do want to speak on that because I think my first day in my meeting with our CEO, when I joined office, I had a list of 18 things, and one of them was to explore a housing service for Hornby and Denman. We're in year 3 now, and I'm going to try to get that done for us to do a feasibility in the coming year. And this could look at either joining the regional housing service as an option. It could look at creating a service for Hornby and Denman as conjoint islands, or it could look at a third option, individual services for each island, or it could look at the status quo and just passing it back to the Islands Trust. But I think I'd like to say that in 2014, when the regional district had the non-binding referendum, Hornby and Denman Island voted 83% in favor of establishing a service for housing. 83%. The valley ended up passing a service at about 52%, but left the 2 islands out. So it's been a perennial issue for 6 years that the islands are kind of left on their own currently without a housing service. So I'm glad for the CEO's words to say that we need to do this, and I'm hoping I'll find support as strategic planning and otherwise for us to pursue that next year. But in the interim, we have actually found really neat ways to help housing. We did a huge contribution to the Hornby Island project a few years ago with a 25,000 contribution for groundbreaking and clearing, which eventually attracted the province with a 2.6 million grant investment into the Beulah Creek project. So as we know, housing is a big complex world. For this one, I just feel like if they're able to find the other 10,000, so we don't contribute the whole thing, but if they can find the rest of the money, I think it'd be not, I'm not sending the signal I want to do that forever. I'm sending the signal that pending us pursuing a feasibility, let's not leave them in the dark either, and without support. So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully that gains enough support from staff and the directors for today. But I would also leave a bit of budget because I do want to contribute to Mars from Hornby and Denman, maybe 1,000 each or something, or 750 each or something like that. And lastly, if I may, on a different topic, while I have the mic, because I realize I'm online, is that okay, Madam Chair?
I will give you that latitude.
Further, okay, so now switch your mind. A different aspect, probably more for Doug DeMarzo and the team here, is I had an email from a constituent yesterday because they saw the discussion. There's discussions around support to the arts on the island, and they say, oh, when will the regional districts support things like the radio and the kitchen and all these groups? And I was going down the list, and I'm like, oh my God, we've literally funded all of these organizations in the last 2 years. So my comment as we continue and we launch the rural community grants is I would like it if staff considered, if as a matter of, or ourselves as a matter of policy, that we actually require our grant recipient to make some form of public announcement to be agreed by staff. It could be a Facebook post or a thing in the paper, but I think many of the organizations may not, make it public that they are receiving these grants. And I was very surprised to hear from a constituent yesterday that named all these nonprofits that we've provided funding to, but that person had no idea. So just a bit of feedback for consideration by staff. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Arbour. And okay, I'm going to go to Director Grieve, and then we're going to try and get through this list.
Thanks very much. As much as I appreciate the offer, Director Grieve is quite able to fund Mars by myself. If you want to maybe kick in $500 each or something like that, that's great. But, Director Arbour is the most taxed here, obviously not taxing, the most stretched as far as his budget goes, but he does have $12,186 in the Hornby Island allotment that he can play forward any way he wants pretty well. And like I say, I've got a little bit of funds remaining, and I'm quite happy to fund Mars's request this year. I think it's so this is an addition to the money they received already, right? So it's for the 20 classrooms. So no, I appreciate the offer. It's up to you if you want to kick in a little bit, but I would think that we've got a lot of other things that are worthy items that we can probably look towards funding. And of course, as we found in the past, there's always the ones that we still haven't heard from, that we may still hear from in this term.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Director Grieve. And that's appreciated because, I hear Director Arbour and, the impact that this, the septic upgrades will help on Hornby, and I'm willing to put some money towards you too. So if that helps to bump up that funding a little bit more over the 10, consider what you'd like to do for that. So maybe as a process, could we start with each item, and then just if that area is able to cover the cost and then moving forward. So I believe we've got the Macaulay Road Area and Neighborhood Association for $1,000. Area C, it can foot the entire bill. Okay. And the Anderton Therapeutic Gardens for $1,500, and Area B can take that on entirely. The Mars Society for $5,000.
Again, I'm willing to do it.
Okay, so Director Grieve is willing to pay the full $5,000. Is that okay with you, Director Arbor?
Yeah, I'm out of funds in the Bain Sound budget. I would have happily contributed from Hornby and Denman because I saw the benefit for the school kids. Just for fun, can we put a $250 each from Hornby and Denman? Because those have been really great field trips. And I know there's many costs involved with that.
Okay, and I can cover the other $5,000 if that sort of makes the math a bit easier too. So $5,000 from 500, and then the rest, 4,000 from Area C. Great. The Merville Community Association for their park party, 700.
I'll cover that.
Okay, and Area C can cover that. And then finally, the Hornby Island Housing Association.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Dan.
well, I was just gonna say, if I guess we want to make decisions, but I think 10,000 is a reasonable amount. It's already a big amount for rural community grants, and I've got a feeling that they'll let us know pretty quick. I want to see the project completed, but hopefully they can identify funds and we can move before March 31st on this. And it also, I think, sends a signal, as our CEO said, that we're not going to take everything. This is a one-time contribution, and the Housing Society's already sent expression and participating in feasibility, so I don't think any of our feedback will be foreign to them. But I'd say reserve your dollars, Dr. Hamir.
Okay, I will do that in case we have any last minute asks from the areas. Okay.
So 10,000
from Hornby, yeah. So, and they'll keep it at 10 so that the association will have to come up with the other 10. Yeah, I'm seeing nods here. And staff are okay. So I guess on receipt of that, how are you, on the receipt of the report, we haven't done that vote, so let's do that. Anyone opposed? And that is carried. And we will move that, I guess the grants be awarded as per our discussion just now as a recommendation 1. Yeah, could I have that moved?
You don't need to.
No, we don't have to do the recommendation, or?
Or on receipt?
Receipt's been done, but we
Okay.
did have recommendations that were asked around the grants.
I think we had done last time is that the recommendation be carried forward as per the updated sheet, Excel sheet of September 20th. I think that's what we did last time after we had corrected everything.
Okay.
Got the Excel pencil going.
Yeah, it's all okay. So thanks, Director Arbor, if you don't mind moving that, I will second. Okay, anyone opposed? And that's carried.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Just wondering if staff has any feedback on my suggestion of requiring grant recipient around this, whether they want this in a motion or they want to think about it, or they just take that as a requested action.
Sure, we'll move it to Kevin.
Thank you very much to the chair, to Director Arbor. So yes, I did capture that in my notes, Director Arbor. So that's something I'll certainly bring back to Doug DeMarzo, and then we can certainly have a conversation. It's not something for formerly grant and aid, now there are community grants that we had normally built into the past because of, the much lesser requirements that were often tied to those grants, but certainly willing to kind of explore that, given that, for a lot of our other major service grants, whether it's community halls or other community groups, we certainly articulate that as part of those funding agreements very explicitly.
Thank you. And it may just be an announcement or something, but it is taxpayers' money, and I think it's good for the communities to know that those dollars are put to work. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Grieve, is this for under this or under new business? Yeah. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Just a thought that, you know, we could work this into the CVRD communication program as well, right? We can make sure that that maybe we can do some public announcement in the paper about our community grants, and that would help it actually be better known in the community what we're doing and how to apply for the grants, may even generate some new applicants.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. What, you don't think everyone watching on YouTube right now are going to be spreading this? Thanks. Okay. All right. So we did have a few notices of motion under new business. I have one from Director Grieve. Do you want to go ahead? Sorry.
We can wordsmith this a little better, but in light of the presentation we had today, I request that staff come back with a report identifying what is possible from a local government perspective to support the society to identify emergency access and egress routes along the Macaulay Road corridor.
I can second that. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing and seeing none. Anyone opposed? And before we vote, Lisa, you got the wording? Okay, and that's carried. And Director Arbor, did you have a motion as well?
Yeah, it seems like a new practice we're starting. It kind of goes around the little rule we have to not do stuff at the same meeting, but it's not a decision, it's request for information.
Yes.
So I'd like to request that CVRD staff investigate with Hornby Water Stewardship the potential to address their request for an incentive and rebate program to address water shortage needs on Hornby Island. And if staff wants, I know the CEO made a reference earlier to the broader regional picture. I'm quite open to adding that regional picture if staff sees value in that.
Madam Chair, no need to, but just we are aware, as you are, we're having an electoral area forum dedicated to water and water management, and so we can't help but have that the information shared and form this report and our response to this request as well.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
I wonder if we can invite the Hornby Island group to that forum. No, or would they be able to watch? Are we recording it?
If it's public, they would be able to watch, and it is. Okay. So yeah, but it is limited to the elected representatives of the municipalities and our partners, Islands Trust, I believe.
Okay, thanks. Well, maybe just try and make them aware of that. So we have that motion from Director Arbor. Lisa, have you got the wording? Okay. Yeah. I can second. So we can discuss. Are any comments on that motion? Hearing and seeing none, is anyone opposed? And that is carried. I don't believe we have any media questions or in camera. Anyone want to move termination?
Move termination.
Second.
Second. Thank you, everyone. Great meeting.
See you in person tomorrow.
Yes. See you then.
Ciao.